Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chel Gimel, and Mir Hashem today we will be learning Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos, and we have been working our way through the complex halachas of Shehiyah and Chazara, maintaining cooked items on a stovetop or an oven on Shabbos, returning things to the fire after they've been taken off, etc., etc., and we're going to continue on that theme today. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanasunim B'Tzaru B'Ashivya Ha'imdim Bein B'Yama Bein B'Yabasha Hamakim Yirachem Aleim Ha'Yitzir Mitzar L'Rvacha Me'Afelu L'Oiro B'Shiba L'Geula Hashta B'Golo V'Zman Kariv and Emaramein. And our learning should be a schus Refuah Shalema for David ben Belima. So we pick up today on the top line of Chav Gimel Amud Beis Siman Reish Nun Gimel Sif Hey, and we're going to learn now about a kula that many people are familiar with. Says the Mechaber in Sif Hey, Mutter loses al pi kederas chamin b'Shabbos. You're allowed to place on top of a pot that has hot food in it on Shabbos, tavshil, a cooked dish, shenis bashel me erev Shabbos, that was fully cooked from erev Shabbos, kol tzarchai, shenis bashel me erev Shabbos, kol tzarchai, a dish that was fully cooked on erev Shabbos, kegoin pandish. For example, a pandish. What's a pandish? A pandish is a deli roll. A pandish is a dough that is filled with meat, a meat knish. So that's a pandish. Now, we should note right away that the Mechaber is talking specifically here about something like a pandish. He doesn't say a kedera. He doesn't say a pot. He says a pandish. A pandish is a davar yavesh. A pandish is a dry food. It might have some grease, some oil in it, in the meat, a little bit of fat, but it's a dry food. We're not talking here about a davar lach. So again, what does the Mechaber say you're allowed to do? Mutter loses al pi kederas chamin b'Shabbos. You could put on top of a pot that's filled with hot food, you could put on top of that tavshil shenis bashel me erev Shabbos kol tzarchai, a dish that was fully cooked from erev Shabbos, kigoin pandish, like a pandish, v'kiyoytze behen, or another davar yavesh, similar to a pandish, lechamamon, in order to heat it up. So, over here in the Mechaber, we are not talking about chazara. Over here in the Mechaber, we're talking about hanocha lechatchila. We're talking about taking a food that was not on the fire or on the blech at all on Shabbos. So you have something that you cooked. You have this meat knish that was fully cooked on erev Shabbos. Now you want to reheat it. You want to heat it up. It's cold. You want to heat it up. What are you allowed to do? So you can go over to your blech. You have a pot, and you have your cholent pot is by the fire, and you could take this meat knish and you could put it on top of the cholent pot in order to warm it up. And the Mechaber says the reason this is mutter is lefi she'ein derech bishul bekach, because this is not the derech bishul. Now let's remind ourselves, all of these isurim that we have been talking about, the isur of shehiyah, the isur of chazara, what are they all based on? They're all based on the same issue. Really, if you have this pandish, if you have a cooked dish, a fully cooked dish that was fully cooked on erev Shabbos, and it's cold, and you want to reheat it, why can't you put it on the fire on Shabbos? There's no bishul. It's a davar yavesh, so the fact that you're reheating it doesn't constitute bishul. It's a mavushal called tzarchai. So again, there's no iser bishul over here. Why can't you put it on the fire? The reason you can't put it on the fire is because of mechzi kimavushal. It looks too similar, like doing bishul on Shabbos. And we're afraid if people are going to be allowed to do such things, they're going to come to bishul on Shabbos. Therefore, says the Mechaber, if you want to take this fully cooked pandish, and you want to take it and put it on top of the cholent pot, that's not mechzi kimavushal. Nobody cooks by putting something on top of a pot that's filled with food. You want to make scrambled eggs, you're not going to take a frying pan, put it on top of a cholent pot and make scrambled eggs that way. So this is not the derech bishul. Since it's not derech bishul, says the Mechaber, there is no room here for a concern of mechzi kimavushal, and in this case, even hanocha lechatchila is mutter. We're not talking about chazara. We're not talking about a pandish that was on the fire and you took it off and you want to put it back. We're talking about something that was completely off the fire. It was never on the fire on Shabbos. You want to heat it up for your daytime Suda, you could take it and you could put it on top of the cholent pot. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Pei Hey, Al Pikideras Chamin, Afilu Hi Medes Aloish. Even if the cholent pot is on the fire, you could take the pandish and you could put it on top of the cholent pot. Ois Cotton Pei Vav, but it has to have been mevushal called tzarchai from before Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Pei Vav. Da, you should understand. The das harajba, it's the opinion of the Rajba, and if you take a look at the Beragola, Ois Cotton Reish, this halacha that the Mechaber is bringing us is from the Rajba. Mishnah Berurah says, da, you should understand. The das harajba, it's the opinion of the Rajba. The davar shekvar nispashal, when you have a fully cooked food, afilu nitztane nachakach legamri, even if it becomes totally cooled down, it's cold. It was fully cooked on Erev Shabbos, and now it's cold. Su lespe mishum bishul. There is no longer an isser of bishul on such a food. Afilu hu davar sheyesh b'roitiv. The Rajba holds that there wouldn't be bishul on such a food, even if it has gravy. In other words, even if there's a davar lach component. The Rajba holds, once something is mevushal called tzarchai, it's fully cooked, even if it's nitztanen lekamri, even if it cools down all the way, and you go ahead and you reheat it to the level of yatzeh ledespai, according to the Rajba, that does not constitute bishul. Aval, HaShulchan Aruch sasam lekaman b'simin shin yud ches siv dalet. However, the Shulchan Aruch assumes lahalacha in shin yud ches siv dalet kedas harosh, like the sheet of the Rosh, who argues on the Rajba, Shesover, who holds the bedavar sheyesh by marok, that when you're dealing with a cooked dish that has a liquid component, it has a gravy or a sauce, im nitztanin, if it becomes cold, yesh by achakach oid mishum bishul, then there would be bishul. So what's the Mishnah we're pointing out of here? The halacha that we just learned comes from a Rajba. Now you have to understand, the Rajba holds ein bishul achar bishul, to the extent, if you have a food that is mevushal called tzarchai, even if it has a sauce or a gravy, so it has a davar lach component, if it cooled down completely and now you reheat it on Shabbos, that does not constitute bishul. That's the sheet of the Rajba. The Rosh disagrees with the Rajba in one point. The Rosh says, you're right by a davar yavesh. If you have a davar yavesh that was fully cooked before Shabbos, and it became cold, and you reheat it on Shabbos, ein bishul achar bishul. That does not constitute bishul. But the Rosh says, if there's marok, if there's sauce or gravy or davar lach, and the davar lach component was nitztanen legamri, and now you go ahead and you reheat it, that is called bishul, and the Shulchan Aruch paskins like this Rosh. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, v'hacha bepandish demekel HaShulchan Aruch lechamemon, here in Sif Hey, where the Mechaber is telling you, you could take this cold pandish and you could put it on top of the cholent pot and you could reheat it to the level of yatzeh ledesbai. So v'hacha bepandish demekel HaShulchan Aruch lechamemon, here by the pandish, the meat knish, where the Shulchan Aruch is being mekel, and he's telling you that you're allowed to reheat it on Shabbos, va'afilu im yeh yatzeh ledesbai, even if you're going to reheat it to the degree of yatzeh ledesbai. Why is he being mekel? Mishum dehu davar she'ein b'roitiv. He's specifically talking about something like a pandish that doesn't have roitiv, it doesn't have gravy, it doesn't have sauce. Ki pandish hu lechem afli hamamula b'basar, because this pandish is just a meat knish. It's not a meat knish in a mushroom sauce, it's a dry meat knish. So there's no davar lach component. U'lekulei alma lespe mishum bishul afim nitztanen legamri. And even according to the more machmedik position of the Rosh, like whom the Shulchan Aruch paskins in Shin Yod Ches, over here there's no bishul in reheating the pandish. The pandish is a davar yavesh. It was mevushal called tzarchai. Even if you reheat it on Shabbos to yatzeh ledesbai, there is no isser of bishul. K'moshe kasav siman Shin Yod Ches sif tes vav. Ois cotton pezayin, the Mechaber explains the reason this is mutter is because she ain't derech bishul b'kach. This is not derech bishul. You're dealing with a food that is mavushal called tzarchai. You're dealing with a food which is a davar yavesh. Reheating it to yatzel lettuce by does not constitute bishul. So the only reason this would be aser is because of an issur d'Rabbanan, like the issur d'Rabbanan of shehiyah and chazara. And there's no room for an issur d'Rabbanan over here because all of these issur d'Rabbanan are geboit. They're all built on the idea of mechzi kimavushal. Chazal asered things that look like and taste and smell like bishul, but this doesn't, because nobody cooks by cooking on top of a pot that's full of food. So this is not mechzi kimavushal. So there's no bishul. There's no mechzi kimavushal. There's no reason for an issur. Says the Mishnah Berurah pezayin shei derech bishul b'kach v'tzayin aloymar. Da'af the kaimelon she'asa lite lechatchila b'Shabbos al akira afilu nispashal kol tzarchai v'hu davar cham v'gam akira grufu ketuma. Says the Mishnah Berurah, it's never mutter. You're never allowed to go to the refrigerator, take out food from the refrigerator on Shabbos and put it onto the fire. You can't even put it onto the blech, right? You go to your refrigerator, you take out a deli roll that was mavushal called tzarchai on Erev Shabbos. So it's a fully cooked davar yavesh, right? And it's tan legamri, it's cold. You're not allowed to take it out and put it even on a blech. A blech is garafikotum. You're not allowed to put it on the blech on Shabbos. Why not? There's no bishul. But you're not allowed to do it. Why? Because it's mechzi kimavushal. This is what the Mishnah Berurah is saying over here. He says, da'af the kaimelon, even though we paskin, and it's very important for this to get drilled into your head. Af the kaimelon, even though we paskin, she'asa lite lechatchila b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to initially place something on Shabbos, meaning it wasn't on there before Shabbos. Al akira, onto akira. Afil in this pasha called tzarchai, even if it was previously fully cooked. V'hu davar cham, even if it's hot. Even if somehow it's hot, you're not allowed to. The gam akira grufa ktuma, even if you have a blech, you're not allowed to put it on if it wasn't on before Shabbos. But Hasam over there, hatam mishum denirikim avashal b'Shabbos to derech bishul b'kach. The reason that's aser is because it's mechzi kimavoshel. It looks and feels like you're doing bishul, so Chazal asered it. Aval hacha, but over here, where you want to take the pandish and put it on top of the cholent pot, ain't derech bishul b'kach. This is not called derech bishul. Al yidei hefsik kedera. You don't cook by having a full pot on the fire and then cook on top of it. Ve'in nirikim avashel. So it's not mechzi kimavoshel. Not mechzi kimavashal. And since it's not mechzi kimavashal, there's no room for an issur. Now, there's a very important point that the Mishnah Berurah makes, and this is a shaila that comes up very often. We're differentiating over here between a davar yavesh and a davar lach. By a davar yavesh, ein bishul achar bishul, even if it's nitztane in legamri. So when you're dealing with the dry food, even if you take a totally cold dry food, and you heat it up to the degree of yatzel lettuce by on Shabbos, you're not over bishul. That's not called bishul. By a davar lach, by a soup, a davar lach, if it's fully cooked, so you have a fully cooked chicken soup from the refrigerator, it's fully cooked, but it's cold. It's nitztanin, and now you put it on a fire or something, and you make it yatzel lettuce by, that's bishul. That you're not allowed to do. So we're differentiating between a davar yavesh on the one hand and a davar lach on the other hand. Many people always have the shaila, what constitutes a davar yavesh? What's called a davar yavesh? So for example, somebody served sliced roast on Friday night. So they had a delicious rib roast on Friday night. And now for the daytime Suda, they want to warm up a piece of meat. So they want to use this cooler of sifhei. They want to take a piece of meat out of the refrigerator. It's mavushal kol tzarchai. The meat itself is a davar yavesh. They want to take this piece of meat and they want to put it on top of the cholent pot to warm it up. That would seem to be the heter, the cooler of sifhei. But now they come with a shaila. It's true that the meat itself is a davar yavesh, but this fat, this congealed fat that's on the meat. Now that congealed fat when the meat sits on top of the cholent pot, that congealed fat is going to melt. Once it melts, it's a liquid. So now, is that called that I'm warming up a davar lach? Warming up a davar lach would be aser. That would be bishul. So is this piece of meat, is it called a davar yavesh or is it called a davar lach? That's the answer to that is going to come out from what the Mishnah Berurah is going to say right now. But the Mishnah Berurah really is addressing a different point. His point is noilud. What's noilud? Noilud is when something comes into existence on Shabbos. It wasn't there before Shabbos, it's now here on Shabbos. Noilud, it was born, it was created, so to speak, on Shabbos. Now, noilud is not only when something wasn't existing before Shabbos and it came into existence on Shabbos. When something undergoes a very fundamental change on Shabbos, sometimes after it changes, it's also because of noilud. The Mishnah Berurah is worried about over here. I just gave you the example of a piece of meat. Now, normally, a piece of meat, it has a small amount of fat on it. But what if you want to take a piece of meat and it's full of like congealed sauce and fat all over it, and you're going to put it down now on top of the fire? When it melts, all of that is going to liquefy, and now you're going to have the meat sitting in a nice puddle of liquid. So the Mishnah Berurah is going to address the question of noilud. Before it was congealed fat, now it's liquid gravy. So he's going to address the question of noilud. Says the Mishnah Berurah like this. V'em yesh ba harbe shuman shenikrash. Let's say the dry item that you want to warm up now on Shabbos has a lot of congealed fat. Harbe shuman shenikrash. Shuman is fat, shenikrash means it was congealed. Em yesh by harbe shuman shenikrash. If there's a very significant amount of congealed fat, then yesh lahachmir, then you should be machmir, not to warm it up by putting it on top of the cholent pot, mishum noilad. Because now you're going to have a noilad problem, sheni moyach hashuman. Because the fat is going to melt, and now you're going to have a puddle of gravy. And that's going to be a noilad problem. Now, now, note, the Mishnah Berurah is dealing with the shaila of the shuman shenikrash, but he's only dealing with it in the context of the question of noilad. He doesn't address the question that I posed earlier. Is this a davar yavesh or is this a davar lach? If you're telling me that there's shuman shenikrash, so when I heat up the meat and I heat up that shuman, isn't that going to be a problem of heating up a davar lach? And wouldn't it be aser because I'm taking a davar lach and it's done in legamri and I'm warming it up and I'm making it yatzeledes? Wouldn't that be bishul of a davar lach on Shabbos? The answer is no, because this is something that we find later on in Siman Shin Yud Ches in the Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Kuf. The Mishnah Berurah says over there that it's not aser, it's not considered a davar lach, because since when you put it on the fire, it was a davar yavesh. When you took the piece of roast and you put it onto the top of the cholent pot, the fat was hard, it was congealed, it was dry, it was a davar yavesh. Since when you went to put it on, it was a davar yavesh, even though it's going to liquefy, that is not called heating up a davar lach. That's called heating up a davar yavesh, and therefore there is no iser over here of bishul. Okay, before we move on to the next halacha, I just want to, high level, review the halacha that we just learned, because this is a halacha that a lot of people want to take advantage of and want to use on Shabbos. Aleph Beis. First thing that we need to know, Issa D'Rabbanan 101 on Shabbos. Hanocha lechatchila is never mutter, or almost never mutter. There's no possibility of going to the refrigerator, taking out some slices of deli roll, and putting them on the blech on Shabbos. You can't do that. Even though it's Mavushal called Tzarchai, even though it's a davar yavesh. So there's absolutely no Isser Daraisa of Bishul here. There's no Isser Bishul. What are you doing? You're not doing anything wrong. It's awesome in the Rabbanon. The reason it's awesome in the Rabbanon is because it's Mechzi Kemevashal. it looks like you're performing an act of bishul, and we're afraid it's going to bring to bishul. So that's usher. Says the Mishnah Berurah kula here in Sifei, I'll give you a kula, I'll give you a way that you could heat up your deli roll, your slice of roast, maybe some deli. I'll give you a way that you could heat up a piece of schnitzel, a piece of grilled chicken. I'll give you a way that you could heat up a davar yavesh on Shabbos, even though it wasn't on the blech. And even though it's stan in legamri. What could you do? You could go over to your cholent. Your cholent is a kedera of chamin. It's a pot that's full of food. You could take your davar yavesh and you could put it on top of that pot and you could heat it up that way. Why is it mutter? Well, again, there's no bishul because you're talking about a fully cooked davar yavesh. So there is no bishul. We're saying now, even if there's a little fat on it or a little gravy on it, that's also not an issa bishul, even though it's going to liquefy because it was dry when you put it on, so it's considered a davar yavesh. It's not considered a davar lach. If it's sitting in a lot of fat, the Mishnah Berurah says then you should be machmir because of noilad. But there's no bishul, and there's no merzi kimavashal because this is not a derech bishul. Nobody cooks on top of a pot full of food. That's the halacha that we learned here. Now, there is a lot of raid in the contemporary poskim of the following shaila. The way I just gave this to you was you could put the food that you want to warm up on top of your cholent. Well, let's say you don't have a cholent on the blech. Let's say you have an empty pot, or you have an overturned empty pot. Could you put it on top of an empty pot? The words of the Mechaber were, mutter loses al pikiteras chamen b'Shabbos. You could put it on top of a pot that's filled with chamen. You could put it on top of a pot that has stuff in it. Could you put it on the underside of an empty pot? If you had an inverted pot on top, could you put it on top over there? So, interestingly enough, the Rishiva Zatzar of Moshe, Zechet Tzaddik V'Kosher L'Vracha, was Mekel. And he said, yes, you can. Why? Because again, ein nir kimavashal. That's not merzi kimavashal. That doesn't look like an act of bishul, and therefore he extends the kula even to that extent, and says that would be mutter. Other poskim disagree. From the Mishnah Berurah, we can't really tell. The Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Pei Zayin, he just says ein derech bishul bekach al yedei hefsik kedera. It's not the derech bishul to cook with a pot interposing between what you're trying to cook and the fire. He doesn't say anything about the pot being full of food. He just says a pot. The Mechaber says that the pot was full, but maybe the Mechaber is only speaking, what's the lashon the Chazal always use? The way it is, lashon haiva. This is the derech. This is, you want to warm it up. Pashtus, you have a pot of cholent on the fire, put it on top of the pot of cholent. People generally don't have empty pots on the blech or on the fire. Okay, weiter. So, the Mechaber just gave me a kula and gave me an eitzah over here of how I could take a food that was not on the fire at all on Shabbos and I could get it reheated. And he gave us a kula, an oifen where that would be mutter. Now he's going to point out to us that you might go ahead and extend this to another case and think that that's also mutter. Says it's not, says the Mechaber it's not, it would be aser. Third line down, right by the Ois Katan Peches for the Mishnah Berurah, says the Mechaber, Aval lahat min tachas habegodim hanesunin mal gabe amecham vadai oser. But to take food, take cold food, and you want to be matmid it, you want to insulate it in the insulating covers of an insulated pot, that would be oser. So what are we talking about over here? A lot of people do this Friday night. A lot of people, they boil up the chicken soup before Shabbos, and then they do hatmana before Shabbos. They take towels, they take blankets, and they wrap the chicken soup, they wrap the pot in insulating materials, and that's how they keep it hot. They turn the fire off. They don't want to have a fire on Shabbos. And this is how they keep the soup hot for Friday night. Now, as long as they're using materials like towels that are something that are not moisiv hevel, these are not materials that generate heat. They don't add heat to the food. These are just materials that insulate. They make the food retain the heat, but they don't add heat. As long as you do that before Shabbos, you're allowed to do that. Okay, so now somebody comes home for the Friday night Suda, and his chicken soup is sitting over there in the kitchen, all insulated in the towels. And he says, you know what? I didn't think I was going to want a main dish, but now I realize I'm a little hungrier than I expected. I would love to have a nice warm piece of schnitzel, but the schnitzel is in the refrigerator. Oh, you know what I'll do? I'll take a slice of schnitzel out of the refrigerator. I'll open up the wrappings of the chicken soup. I'll stick the piece of chicken inside the wrappings, and I'll close it up. And now I'll have a nice warm piece of schnitzel for Friday night for a main dish after the soup. Says the Mechaber, that is absolutely osur. Aval lahat min tachas habegodim hanesunim al gabe hamecham. But to go ahead and take something and put it inside the insulating wrappers that are wrapped around a hot pot or a hot kettle, vadai osur. That would be osur. And the reason that's osur is because that's hatmana lichatchila on Shabbos. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to do hatmana, even with materials that are not moisiv hevel. Even on materials that only retain heat but don't add heat. You're not allowed to do hatmana lichatchila on Shabbos. And this would be hatmana lichatchila on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Aval lahatmin. Ritzayin alarma. What the Mechaber wants to say is, if you have a pot of soup, or a pot of cholent, or you have a kettle of hot water, and it was fully wrapped, even on top with begodim, with blankets or towels, so you did hatmana, it's mutman from before Shabbos, even if it's not sitting on a fire. You wouldn't be allowed to take your nice davar yavesh pandish, the meat knish, and stick it inside the insulated wrappings around the pot. The kaimalon, because we paskin the also lahatmin b'Shabbos, that you're not allowed to perform hatamana on Shabbos. Afilu tafshil shu mevushal kol tzarchai, even if the item that you're trying to be matmin, the food that you want to stick in, is fully cooked. Vircham, and even if really it's still warm. Vafilu b'davar shein moisiv hevel, and even if you're using towels and stuff that are not moisiv hevel, that don't add heat. So you have all sorts of reasons to be makel over here. You're taking a piece of schnitzel that's mavushal called tzarchai. It's not even tztan legamri. It's still warm. And the insulated pot is not sitting on a fire. And you're using, for the insulation, you're using materials that are not moisiv hevel. You're still not allowed to take that piece of schnitzel or the pandish, whatever it is, and put it inside. Because it would be an act of hatmana on Shabbos, and you're not allowed to do an act of hatmana on Shabbos. Now we go to the Ramah, end of the third line down. Hagah. V'hu adin, and the same halacha applies. She'aser lahanicha al gabe kira afilu grufu ktuma. Now the Ramah spells out what I told you, the aleph base that we need to drill into our heads over here. V'hu adin she'aser lahanicha al gabe kira afilu grufu ktuma. You wouldn't be allowed to take the pandish, that's a davar yavesh that's fully cooked, even if it was warm. You're not allowed to take it and put it onto the kira on Shabbos if it wasn't there before Shabbos. I feel a grufu ktuma, even if it's grufu ktuma. So what does that mean for us? Even on the blech. The blech is a kira that's grufu ktuma. You can't take your pandish out of the fridge and put it onto the blech, even though it's grufu ktuma, and even though the pandish is mavushal kol tzarchai, and even though it's a davar yavesh, because the only possible way of reheating, generally speaking, is through chazara. Chazal would never matter you to do hanocha lichatchila, to put something onto a kira lichatchila, to put something onto a blech lichatchila. For the first time, it wasn't on Shabbos, and now you want to put it on Shabbos. I don't mean lichatchila versus b'diavad. I mean lichatchila, initial placement. To put something onto the blech initially on Shabbos, it wasn't on the blech before, that's never mutter. Even if it's mavushal called tzarchai, even if it's still warm, even if it's a davar yavesh, there's no possibility of bishul. It's still aser. Why? Because it's mechzik mavushal. The lo yitiru el chazara u'kederek shenisbar. Chazal were makel by chazara. Something was on the fire, it came off, you want to put it back. That's not mechzik mavashal. That's not initial placement. That's replacing something on the fire. And and it's not even an exception. The leniency, the kula of the mechaber of Sif Hey, where you're taking the pandish that wasn't on the fire, but you're not putting it on the kira. You're putting it on top of the cholent pot. That's different. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Cotton Peites. She'aser lahanichai. V'hanacha lechatchila b'Shabbos aser. Initial placement on a kira. Initial placement on a kira, even if it's garfa kotum. Initial placement on a blech is aser. Afilu hu adayin reiseach. Even if the food that you want to put on is mamish hot, it's reiseach, it's boiling. Umitztamik v'raloi. And further cooking would denigrate it. Doesn't matter. Hanacha lechatchila is aser. Okay, now we come to a fascinating piece of Ramah. This piece of Ramah, I spent hours on it, and there's still more hours to spend on it. But I'll give it to you in the simplest way that we can. Says the Ramah, fascinating thing. Says the Ramah, remember where we're coming off of. We're coming off of the Aleph Beis, that Hanacha lechatchila is always aser. We saw Kula in the Mechaber, where you could take something and put it on top of the cholent pot, on top of the chicken soup pot. Because why? That's not mechzik mavashal. Even though it's kind of like Hanacha lechatchila, it wasn't on the fire at all on Shabbos, and now I'm putting it on to reheat it, but I'm not putting it on the kira. I'm not putting it on the blech. I'm putting it on top of the cholent pot. That's not nirik mavashal. That was the Kula of the Mechaber. Now, the Ramah turned around. The Ramah said, remember, Hanacha lechatchila is always aser. Now says the Ramah, v'yesh matirin. However, there are those that are matir, litain l'soich tanur sha'afu boy miba'oid yoim. Says the Ramah, back in the day, they had a baking oven, which was a significant oven. I assume wood burning, coal burning, coals inside. And they would use it to bake on Erev Shabbos. Maybe that's where the Rebbetzin baked the challah on Erev Shabbos. But it was only used on Erev Shabbos. So she baked on Erev Shabbos, and then took the challah out, closed the oven, and that's it. We're done with the oven. So we're done with the oven Friday, maybe Friday morning even. We're done with the oven. Now the oven sits. Okay. Says the Ramah, there are those that are matir, hanacha lechatchila, to put food in that oven Shabbos morning. That oven still retains some heat. It's a significant oven, maybe with very thick stone walls. So it retains heat for a long time. So even though that oven was shut down on Friday, and it wasn't used, we're going to say that you didn't keep hot food in it Friday night. No, you used it to bake on Friday, maybe Friday morning, and then you shut that oven down. Now you woke up Shabbos morning, and you decide, like I said earlier, you want to warm up your schnitzel. You want to warm up your pandish. You want to warm up your deli roll. So you want to put it inside this tanner. We told you could put it on top of the cholent pot. Now, says the Ramah, yesh matirin, to take the deli roll, to take the schnitzel, to take the davar yavesh, and put it inside this oven on Shabbos morning. Now again, this is not chazara. This is hanacha lechatchila. This was off the fire, the whole Shabbos. You decided now, I want to take my cold deli roll and I want to heat it up. Says the Ramah, there are those that were matir to put it inside this oven that was shut down on Erev Shabbos. Why? Because since you did not use this oven Friday night, you are not matmin food inside this oven Friday night. So you did not use this oven as a warming oven Friday night. Rak afu by mi ba'idyon. You only used it to bake in it Friday morning. So loinisha by rak hevel ma'at. It's not going to be so hot. It's only going to be warm. Vein lachush lebishel. And therefore there's no bishel issue. Ubavad shaloin nitztanin legamri. As long as the food that you want to put in there is not nitztanin legamri. It can't be totally cooled off. It has to be epis warm. Okay. Before we dive into the Mishnah Berurah, because the Mishnah Berurah is going to get a little confusing, the way I'm learning this Ramah, after spending hours on it and after consultation with others, is again, what the Ramah is being matir over here is a fascinating heter. The Ramah is being matir hanocha lechatchila. He's being matir taking a pandish, taking a deli roll, taking a dry piece of schnitzel, a dry piece of grilled chicken that was not on the fire at all on Shabbos, and taking it and putting it inside this oven on Shabbos morning. Why? Because it's not so hot. How hot is it? Well, there's an astonishing Sharetzion. Sharetzion is cut peches. The af sheyesh chaim shayad seledes by. It's still yad seledes. So you hear what we're being matir? We're being matir to take this food that wasn't on the fire at all on Shabbos and put it into this baking oven, which is still yad seledes. And this is not chazara. This is hanocha lechatchila. That's what the Ramah seems to be matir over here. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in tzaddik. Litain l'soich. Hainu. What does he mean? Shenoisen b'Shabbos baboiker. Shabbos morning, you woke up, and you're putting b'soich hatanor, inside this tanor, hatavshil shenis bashel, a cooked dish that was fully cooked, kedei sheyes chamim, in order to heat it up. So it sounds like what's happening over here is maybe somebody made roast for Friday night. The roast didn't go in the refrigerator. I don't know how much refrigeration they had back in the day of the Ramah, right? They didn't have refrigeration. So they made roast. They had roast Friday night. Now, Shabbos morning, it's not in legamri. It's still epis warm. Maybe it's during the summer, short nights. But it's still somewhat warm. It's not in legamri. Now you could take it and put it inside this oven. Lechatchila, hanacha lechatchila, you could put it in Shabbos morning. Even though we said earlier in Sif Beis that to put something inside a tanur is exceptionally chamor. When we learned the halachas of chazara, we said you can do chazara al gabe hakira. You could do chazara onto the top of the kira if you met the 5 conditions of chazara. If the food was mavushal kol tzarchai, if the kira was garfikatum, if when you took it off you had daitoi lahachzira, if it was oida biyadai, if you met all of these conditions, you're allowed to do chazara on top of a kira. Are you allowed to do chazara into a tanur? No. The Mechaber said you're never allowed to do even chazara into a tanur. Even if the tanur is garfikatum, you're not allowed to do chazara into a tanur. Because toich hatanur, that's too much derech bishul, it's too much hot, it's too much mechzi kimavashal, that's never mutter. And yet over here we're being matir, hanocha lechatchila, inside a tanur. So says the Mishnah Berurah, even though even though we're so machmir by toich hatanur, even if it's gar for kotam, even chazara is aser. Deina mutar rak al gaba. We only found a heter for even chazara, only on top of the kira. Hacha over here. Akar shelo yitminu by chamed l'Shabbos. Since this oven was not intentionally kept warm for Friday night, because you didn't use it as a warming oven for Friday night. Rak afu by mi ba'od yoim. It was only used for baking during the day on Friday. Ein boy lamocha rak choy muit. It's the next day, Shabbos morning. It's not so hot, even though the Sharetzion says it's still yad seledis boy. Ve'ein nirek kimavashal al yedei zeh. This is the Yesoid. It's not merci kimavashal. You have a baking oven that was used on Friday. It was shut off on Friday. It wasn't intentionally kept hot for Friday night. You didn't use it for warming purposes Friday night. Now, when you look at it Shabbos morning, it's not looked upon as a cooking implement anymore. It's a cold oven. Now, it happens to be that if you would put in a thermometer, it's not cold. It's still maybe even yatzeledes. But it's not merzi kimavashal. So the same way you could take the pandish and you could put it on top of the cholent pot. It's hot, I don't understand. Over the cholent pot, it's hot. It might even be yatzeledes. The top of the cholent pot definitely is yatzeledes. And it could bring the food to yatzeledes, but it's not near a kimavashal. It's not merzi kimavashal. Nobody cooks that way. So too, nobody cooks in a cold oven. This is a cold oven. So when you take the pandish and you go to put it in that oven Shabbos morning, it's mutter, even though this pandish was never on the fire on Shabbos, even though it's hanacha lechatchila, because it's not merzi kimavashal. Umashma, now the Mishnah Berurah makes a technical point. Umashma, from the words of the Ramah, it is mashma. De'im hayatamin b'chamin mi'erev. If this oven would have been used as a warming oven Friday night, the nafish havlei de tanor, so it would be nice and hot. It would be a hot oven. Then you would never be allowed to put something inside that oven Shabbos day to go warm it up. Says the Mishnah Berurah, even though the Ramah is the one that's saying this, and the Ramah is the one making that implication is only true according to the sheet of the kolboy. If you remember earlier, we said that the Ramah paskins like the Ran, that all of the Isurim of Chazara are only germane when the pot came off the fire on Erev Shabbos, and now you're putting it onto the fire on Shabbos. That's when there are restrictions of Chazara, because when you put it back on the fire, it's merzi kimavashal lechatchila. But when food was taken off the fire on Shabbos and it's being put back on the fire on Shabbos, that's not merzi kimavashal. Everybody understands that putting it back is only a continuation of the taking it off, so it's not merzi kimavashal. So the Ramah is very makel when it comes to Chazara. So points out the Mishnah Berurah, a quick reading of this Ramah, it sounds like the Ramah is giving you this kula to put the food into this oven Shabbos morning only because it's cold. But if it would be warm, because you used it as a warming oven Friday night, you used it to keep your chicken soup hot Friday night, so you made sure it was good and hot. So if the oven was hot, then you wouldn't even be allowed to do chazara into this oven. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that's not really true according to the Ramah. Because according to the Ramah, you could do chazara into an oven if you took food off on Shabbos. Ice cutting Sadik Aleph, but this heter of putting food into this cooled off oven, into this closed down oven on Shabbos morning, is only if the food was not nitztanin legamri. Now, why not? So there's going to be two reasons why not. Let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says. Legamri. If the dish that you want to put in the oven already cooled off completely, it's stan legamri, then there would be an isser of bishul. And you wouldn't even be allowed to stick it into this closed down oven. Because it might come to the degree, heated to the degree of yatzeledes, and it would be an isser bishul. What's the Mishnah Berurah saying? What the Mishnah Berurah is saying is like this. The Ramah said, this heter that I'm giving you to put the food Shabbos morning into the closed down oven, that's only if you're talking about food that's not nitztanin legamri. Okay, why? What if it is nitztanin legamri? So the Mishnah Berurah is explaining, if the food was nitztanin legamri, then to take food that's nitztanin legamri and heat it up to the degree of yatzeledes, that's bishul. Now, when is that true? That's only true by a davar lach, not by a davar yavesh. So this Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Sadik Aleph, has to be talking about a davar lach. This is not talking about a pandish. This is not talking about a meat knish or a deli roll or a piece of schnitzel. This is talking about cholent, a davar lach, a soupy cholent, or a soup. So again, the Ramah's heter was, you woke up Shabbos morning, you have some food that's still a little bit warm, you want to put it into this closed down oven that you shut down on Erev Shabbos sometime. So the Ramah said there's a heter. You could put it in. It's not Mersi Kimavashal. But the Ramah said not if it's Stan and Legamri. Why not? Well, it depends. If what you want to put in is a Davar Lach, then to put it in would actually be an Isser Bishul. Because you're taking a Davar Lach that was Nitztan Legamri, you're reheating it to the degree of Yatzeledis by, that's an Isser Bishul. But what if it's a Davar Yavesh? How about if it's a Davar Yavesh, a dry item, a piece of grilled chicken, and it was Nitztan Legamri, and you want to put it in this oven? Would that be mutter? So the Bir Halacha over here, Dibra Maskal, Bavad Shlein Nitztan Legamri, seems to be mesupik about this. The Magen Avram says it would be Aser. Why would it be Aser? Not for the reason that the Mishnah Berurah just gave it Tzadik Aleph. The reason it would be Aser is because, again, we have to understand what the Yesod, what the underpinnings of the heter is. The underpinning of the heter is that it's not nirikim avashal. It doesn't look like an act of cooking to put your food back into this oven that was shut down on Erev Shabbos. So therefore, what Isser is there? If you're talking about a Davar Yavesh, so it's fully cooked, even if it's Stan Legamri, there is no Isser Bishul. If it's not nirikim avashal, if it doesn't look like an act of cooking, why should it be Aser? Says the Magen Avram, the reason we're going to aser it, if it was the Stan Legamri, even by a Davar Yavesh, is because that does look like an act of cooking. When you take something that's mamish stone cold, and you stick it in an oven, even if it's not derek bishul, because it's a baking oven that was shut down Friday morning, when you take something that's stone cold and you put it in an oven, the Magen Avram suggests that's automatically nirikim avashal. And that's why this would be Aser, sai if it's a Davar Lach, sai if it's a Davar Yavesh. Continues the Ramah 3 lines from the bottom near the end of the line. V'yesh machmirin bazeh. However, the Ramah says there are those that are machmir and would not let you do this hanaka lechatchila into this cooled off oven. She'im, the Mishnah Berurah is going to take out that vav. She'emachayim kol kach betaner sheyatze lettuce by aser, because if the oven would be hot to the degree of yatze lettuce by, this would be aser. Va'ayil kamon Siman shin yud ches sif yud dal. It says the Mishnah Berurah, ois cotton tzadik beis bazeh. There are those that are machmir. Taimam, why are they machmir against this heter? The chazar l'sachataner la'ilam aser bein amachayim shabataner rav imat. Because these shittas rationalize, I guess is the word I was going to use, that when we said earlier that chazara is always aser into a tanur, Chazal didn't differentiate between one kind of tanur and another kind of tanur. It depends how hot the tanur is, depends when you shut the tanur down. Did you use the tanur Friday night? Did you not? No. We said that there's an Isser chazara, and we said that there are heterim to do chazara al gabe kira, if you meet the 5 conditions, and we said that chazara, even chazara, is always aser into a tanur. So if chazara is always aser into a tanur, then hanocha lechatchila into a tanur on Shabbos is zecha always aser. So that's why they disagree with this heter. However, they only quibble with the Ramah's heter if this oven is heated to the degree of Yatzeledis by. If this oven is mamish cooled down, if it's not even Yatzeledis by, then it's no different than a kitchen cabinet, right? It's not an oven. If you have an oven that's hot from Friday afternoon, but it's not Yatzeledis by, it's essentially not an oven. It's a kitchen cabinet. So then you could put in whatever you want. You could do it lechatchila, you could do chazara, you could do whatever you want. Not an issue. I cut inside Gimel. The words in the Ramah were ve'im hachoim kol kach. Says the Mishnah Berurah tzarich lomar she'im hachoim. The yilavach yafilu yesh machmirin shari. If it's not hot to the degree of Yatzeledis by, then everybody would be mad to this. V'chein sasam haRamah le'el b'seisif beis b'hagah. Okay, we're a drop short of the Dirshu page, but I don't think I have a choice. I'm going to stop over here, and we will continue next time from V'chal Hadvarim, 2 lines off the bottom here, Al Chav Gimel Amud Beis. Very complex subject matter. I hope I'm giving it over in a clear, cogent way that everyone can understand. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discuss of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rambam she said, Yeshua said for us, Parnasset Shaduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Kol Tzedek, prepare for Yaveinu. Amen. Be well.